This year, we dedicate the festival to the notion of bravery, bravery in the personal and political lives of the individuals and professionals. Nothing can be more fitting than feature an event with Palestinian writers, first time ever in the 9 years history of the festival, which we are very proud of. I have a quick announcement. You probably already noticed Judith Butler can't be with us today, as she had to handle a family emergency, unfortunately, but luckily Elias Curry was available to stand in and moderate this evening. Thank you, Elias. Elias Curry.
Okay, thank you. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really honored to be on this panel. First, to replace Judith Butler, who was a great scholar and a very close friend of mine, and unfortunately she cannot come. And second, because this panel is about Palestine. And Palestine, it's not only a great subject, it's not only a great tragedy, but it's also a profound wound in the Arab consciousness and in modern Arabic literature. Today we are gathering with 3 Palestinian writers. I'm supposed to say that they are 3 young Palestinian writers. But actually I don't like this term, because I don't think that in writing we can differentiate between writers according to age. Writing has no age, and we communicate with the texts of writers as if they are present even when they are absent. Now speaking about present and absent, the whole question of Palestine lies there in this relationship between absence and presence. And as Edward Said has put it in his book, The Question of Palestine, and paradoxically, the Israelis, when the state of Israel was declared after the Palestinian Nakba in 1948, the citizens of Palestine, that is the Palestinians, were put into categories. And there is a very special category which was called the presence absence. And I think the connotation of this category, between these presence absence, for example, was the great Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. So this category of presence absence, which was originally put in order to make the Palestinians shadows in their own country, represents the reality of Palestine nowadays. As I said, we have 3 writers. We have Randa Jarrar, Adania Shibli, and Najwan Darwish. We will begin by giving them the floor. Every one of them will read for us something like 6 minutes. And after that, we will begin our discussion. The discussion will be in 2 parts. The first part, I will ask them 2 questions. And then afterwards, the floor will be for the audience to ask them whatever they want. So we begin first by Randa Jarrar. Randa is a writer originally from Jenin in the West Bank. And she was born in the United States in 1978. And she's known for her very interesting and beautiful novel, A Map of Home. And Randa is now a professor of creative writing in California, I suppose. And we will hear from her. She will begin by reading small parts of her work. Please, Randa.
I'm reading an edited down version of a short story called The Story of My Building, after Isaac Babel's Story of My Dovecot. The narrator is male, and this occurs before 2005 in Gaza. I was 10 years old when card game night was moved to our apartment in El Zarqa, the poorest neighborhood in Gaza. We lived in a sprawling compound of buildings which housed grocers, teachers, nurses, tailors, cooks, cobblers, and on the top floor of the third building, a translator of Russian literature, my father. A few hours into card game night, the women would be so far gone into stories and the men so garrulous that we would roam free on the roof where the doorman's wife kept her pigeons. We loved the rainbow one, which we dubbed Magic because of the shifting iridescent colors on its blue-black neck. We unhooked the cage door and brought Magic out, passing him from hand to hand. Majdouline, the youngest of my cousins, observed that when his neck was gold, he looked like the poster of the Dome of the Rock that her grandmother had plastered onto their kitchen wall. Magic cooed in Majdouline's fists and a glass broke in our apartment. We heard men shouting. I ran downstairs not wanting to miss the argument, and when I flung the front door open, I saw Uncle Fauzi, the cobbler, brandishing his walking stick at my father. "Why are you defending them?" said Fauzi. "You son of a whore, you traitor." "I am simply telling you a historical fact," my Baba said, his hands and arms shielding his head as confidently as possible. "No, you are defending the Zionists. They use these things as an excuse to steal our land. Why do you believe it?" It was a discussion I was somewhat familiar with, although I was unclear exactly who Holocaust and pogrom were. I imagined that they were friends of Balfour's. His name was brought up often too, though I had no fucking idea who he was either. The other men put down their blue-backed playing cards, but my father still held his like a fan in his left hand. I wondered if he thought they would defend him from the blows of Uncle Fauzi's walking stick, which was brown and did not appear to be flimsy. My Baba opened a book which he had translated and began to read. At first, Uncle Fauzi made spitting sounds whenever Baba said the word Jew. Then all was quiet and we listened while Baba read the story of Babel's first dovecot. Clapped at the story of Babel getting his first in class and ended with, quote, "And so with Kuzma, I went to the house of the tax inspector, where my parents, escaping the pogroms, had sought refuge," end quote. The men shifted in their seats, sighed, the way they do after they hear ladies sing beautiful songs on the radio. My Baba and Babel were one beautiful lady singing. All the men in my family were lazy and slow to any action, whether ill or well considered. That is what my mother told me, but she was unhappy with our lot and with the lot of the men who showed up at our door, my great uncles and older cousins who had no jobs and no homes. Mother believes intellectuals are weak. "Have you ever squeezed a poet's arm?" she said to me once. "It's thin like a small girl's and soft. It's not a man's arm. They do nothing but think, and the heaviest things they lift are pens." "When did you squeeze a poet's arm?" my father asked in mock jealousy. Mama clicked her tongue against the top of her mouth and said she'd been alive for 2.5 decades before she met him and had squeezed some poets. He laughed at her. She said he was too lazy to be really jealous or enforce any sense of propriety in the house like a real man. To this, he didn't answer at all, and once again was labeled lazy. I spent the months before my final exam studying to prove that I'm not lazy. I memorized 3 diwans of verse from Mutanabbi to Darwish, paced around my room to the beat of the poems because it helped me learn them faster. I sometimes left tears on the edges of my eyes when I repeated the lines by Darwish, quote, "So leave our land, our shore, our sea, our wheat, our salt, our wound." By the 50th or 60th repetition, I did not weep at all, but recited with anger and conviction. I lost my voice and found it a week later. I rarely saw my pigeons or went to the roof. I heard Majdouline, my cousin, practicing her flute on the roof one afternoon. Her mother hated music, and Majdouline was never allowed to practice inside the apartment. In June, a list was posted outside the headmaster's office with the names of all the students and their rank. I was ranked first. My father and the men carried me on their shoulders and sang and danced in the makeshift dance hall that was our living room. Uncle Fauzi said that I was not to become a martyr. He said that I was too smart and the homeland needed me alive. The other men agreed with him, and soon my feet were on the ground again. The men said they would build me a dovecot to celebrate my success. I told them I had a big cage on the roof already, and they said it was too small and not worthy of a prince. This excited me, so I jumped into Baba's embrace and thanked him. Early the next evening, I set out to look for wood and paint for my dovecot. The water carrier was walking around without any water, cursing loudly, and a few blocks away from my apartment, 2 boys were flying a blue kite they had drawn a peacock on. The blue peacock was brilliant against the sky, its fantail a cloud, the long string running from its drawn paw to the boy's hand. At the hardware store, Abu Allam sat in a rickety chair and fanned himself with his white handkerchief. I told him the men were building me a dovecot, and he said he would have wood and paint for them early next week. Next week, I said, and I asked him why it would take so long, and he told me to look around me. Things are terrible, he yelled. Open your eyes. I did just as he said, pulled my eyelids up from my eyes and looked up and down the street, but all looked as it always did. I shrugged and walked around the block past the bird market, which was closed, past old Ammu Khadr in his black wheelchair. He had a single pack of cigarettes in his lap and was vocally trying to hawk it. The sun had vanished, and I began to make my way back home before Mama began to worry. At the mouth of Mansoura Street, the neighborhood's main thoroughfare, I saw a small line of green tanks. I turned around and stopped, then turned again and walked to the soldiers on the ground. I live in that building, I said. I live there, on this street. Can I go home? No, a soldier answered. He was tall and thin, and his booted legs looked like giant green beans in shiny black pods. This street blocked. No entrance. Go. But where can I go, I said. I have to go home to my mother. My family is inside. What a people, he said. There's a devil in you. Didn't you hear me? No entrance here. I turned my body towards the mosque. I passed Ammu Khadr and saw that he had sold his pack of cigarettes and now had a mobile phone in his lap. I asked to use it, and he pushed it towards me with his curled-in hands. I called my family, but there was no answer, so I tried again and again, but no one was there. I gave the phone back to Ammu Khadr and ran to the mosque, whose minaret was dull and gray in the night sky. The men there covered me in a blanket, and I slept on a straw mat like the Prophet once did. Halfway through the night, I heard bombs. I was scared and I wanted to pee, but I peed on the straw mat. I woke up damp and ashamed. In the morning, I walked back towards my street. The tanks were gone, but I saw on the ground Magic the pigeon, bleeding and still, its rainbow feathers spotted in red. I picked it up and held it against my heart and ran to the building. I saw from a few yards down that the building was no longer there, and I turned around and ran down the street again, as though if I tried again, the building would return. Gray bricks littered the earth, and there was soon a mountain of gray and charred concrete. Everything looked like pale coloring chalk under the brush of the blasted gray bricks and their powdery casts over the mountain. Chalky fabrics and pieces of shoes and curtains and beds and chairs and desks and tables and shards of mirrors and floors and walls. I was standing in a huge cemetery, clutching Magic to my chest. I dropped to my knees from the smell of bombed concrete, and as I lay on the rubble, Magic's guts trickled down into my yellowed lap. I shut my eyes, pushed my lids tightly against each other, my eyes which Abu Allam had just asked me yesterday to open wide at the hardware store. I did not want to see the gray world that spread out around me. I felt something against my cheek and tried to see it with my skin. It was sharp and jagged like a beak. Maybe it was Majdulin's flute. I kept my eyes shut and pressed my body down into the rubble. This rubble did not look anything like real life, like the white piece of paper with my name on it outside the headmaster's office, like Baba's voice when he read from his translations, like Mama teasing him, like Majdulin's hands. I sat there and wished the rubble would swallow me into its jagged and wiry mouth, wished I could belong to it. The earth beneath me smelled, and I sniffed it in and began to weep. I lifted my hand from Magic and wiped my eyes and opened them and saw the mountain on which I sat. I stepped over the gray and chalky rubble and wept as I walked up the street, passing Ammu Khadr, and I wanted to call my family again. I imagined the buried black telephone, ringing muffled rings all through the dead mountain of our building. Ammu Khadr suddenly called to me, Muhannad, ya Muhannad, Fawzi has been looking for you. He's waiting for you at Abu Allam's. I made my way to the hardware store where Uncle Fawzi sat leaning on his cane. Where did you go all night? He yelled, flying about like a stray hare. Did you see what happened? I nodded. Don't worry, he said. Everyone is waiting for you at my building. They all thought you were dead. I went over to Uncle Fawzi and hugged his crooked shoulder, and he patted my back. He heaved as he stood up and dug his cane into the brown earth. We walked away from the market, and I envied the cane in his grasp and wished it was my hand in his. And so I went with Uncle Fawzi to his building where my parents, escaping the bombing, had sought refuge. Thank you.
Thank you, Randa. Our second reader will be Najwan Darwish, and Najwan Darwish is a Palestinian poet from Jerusalem, and with him we will have the scent of the city and the tragedy of the city at the same time. Najwan Darwish is actually everywhere. and he has two books translated, one to French, Je me lèverai un jour, I will stand up one day, and the other is in English, Fabraka, Fabrications, and he is the literary advisor to the Palestine Festival of Literature. This is one of his many things he does. Now Najwan will be reading to us three of his poems. He will be reading in Arabic, and you'll have the translation on the screen. Please.
الأشجار حريصة أن تتمايل دون أن تسقط، لأن الأشجار الساقطة ها هنا لا تتلقاها الأرض لا شيء ولا أحد، ولأنها أشجار لم تعد تحتمل عفن الجذور، لأنها اختارت أن تنبت في الريح، عليها أن تدفع الثمن وأن تسقط بلا نهاية. وعليه أرجوك وأنت تتمايل على الأرصفة أن لا تسقط، لأنك أيضا ستسقط بلا نهاية. لا بأس، لا بأس إن تخيلت أشجارا تتمايل معك وهواء يتلقى سقوطك. أنت الذي عشت مثل هذه الأشجار بلا أرض ولا جذور. نوم في غزة. سأنام يا فادس مثلما ينام الناس، والطائرات تضرب والهواء يتمزق كاللحم الحي. سأحلم إذن بالخيانات مثلما يحلم الذين ينامون والطائرات تضرب. سأستيقظ في الظهيرة لأسأل الراديو مثلما يسأل الناس: هل توقف القصف؟ وكم صار عدد الذين قتلوا؟ لكن مأساتي يا فادس أن الناس نوعان: الذين يلقون عذاباتهم وخطاياهم على قوارع الطرق ليناموا، والذين يجمعون عذابات الناس وخطاياهم على هيئة صلبان ويسيرون بها في شوارع بابل وغزة وبيروت وهم يصيحون: هل من مزيد؟ هل من مزيد؟ قبل سنتين كنت في شوارع الضاحية الجنوبية أجر صليبا بحجم العمارات، لكن من يحمل اليوم صليبا عن ظهر متعب في أورشليم؟ الأرض 3 مسامير والرحمة مطرقة. اضرب يا رب، اضرب مع الطائرات. هل من مزيد؟ قدس. عندما أغادرك أتحجر، وعندما أعود إليك أتحجر. أسميك ميدوزا، أسميك الأخت الكبرى لسدوم وعمورة، أيتها الجرن الصغير الذي أحرق روما. القتلى يسجلون على التلال، والعصاة عاتبون على رواة قصتهم، وأنا أترك البحر ورائي وأعود إليك، أعود بهذا النهر الصغير الذي يصب في يأسك. أسمع المقرئين والمكفنين وغبار المعزين. لم أبلغ 30 ودفنتني مرات كثيرة، وفي كل مرة كنت أخرج من التراب لأجلك. فليذهب إلى الجحيم مبجلوك، فليذهب إلى الجحيم مبجلوك، بائعو تذكارات ألمك، كل الذين يقفون معي الآن في الصورة. أسميك ميدوزا، أسميك الأخت الكبرى لسدوم وعمورة، أيتها الجرن الصغير الذي ما زال يحترق. عندما أغادرك أتحجر، وعندما أعود إليك أتحجر. شكرا.
أحسنتم. Okay. Our third reader is Adania Shibli. Adania lately was teaching at Birzeit University in the occupied West Bank of Palestine. Adania was born in the Galilee in Palestine, in the historic Palestine, and she has published two main novels. The first one, Massas, in 2002, and the second novel, how to say it? We Are All Equally Far from Love, and both took the award of Al-Qattan. And I had the chance and opportunity to be on the jury of the first prize. So I'm very happy that after this first prize, Adania proved to be one of the very interesting names, not only in Palestinian literature, but in modern Arabic literature. Please, Adania.
Hello. I have to say, I really hate reading in loud. I mean, I think it's a torture for a writer to write a text and then have to read it and then in another language. But being an obedient person I agreed to do that. I mean, Jakob, he told me you should read, and then Randa told me what I should read. This is like, so I'm just, normally I would do what others tell me, but I never write what others tell me. At least I still have a room to do that. One of these things that I actually obeyed others, I was invited to something called an East-West Diwan. It's a project that was in Germany. I mean, I accepted taking part in this project. And I'm sure you're aware that after the 9/11 attacks, there was the article by Samuel Huntington about the clash of civilizations, and then everybody was thinking about the East and the West, and we should have a dialogue. And one of the collateral damages of this project are writers like me. I'm going to read here an excerpt of what I wrote then. I think after writing this text, the project collapsed, so it's it came to an end. And I think all this East-West dialogues, I like monologues normally. This text was written in Arabic, but I will read in English, so I hope you can go through my accent as it is. The text was translated by Sunila Mubaya. I hope he's here or she's here. Hello, hi. Thank you for, okay, so I start. It's just an excerpt, like 2 pages. The next day, it begins to rain more heavily than it had in the previous 3 days. I follow the movements of the car's wipers, engrossed in wiping the rain off the front windshield, as we make our way to a literary festival being held in a large villa on the banks of a lake near Berlin. During the festival, my face begins to hurt from so much smiling. The only 2 breaks from smiling are when I eat some sausages and when a journalist asks me if I, as an Arab woman, am facing death threats from my family. I find myself unable to resist the idea and begin to think about who in my family might kill me. It cannot possibly be my father, since he is eternally busy and will not have time even to listen to the idea. My mother only cares about the plants around the house, but in her free time, she will surely mourn my death. My eldest brother will not be able to leave to Germany, as it is now the almond harvesting season, and he's the only one left in the family who can supervise this operation after his eldest son broke his leg. My second eldest brother is a sad story. He distanced himself from us years ago because of family disputes. Possibly, he will call whoever finally kills me to congratulate him, since this is what he has started doing lately, calling family members to congratulate them or offer condolences according to the occasion, but nothing more. How sad it is, and how much I have missed him. My sisters are not to be counted, as they are nonviolent and completely reject the use of violent methods, or at least I hope so. Other than that, I have two paternal uncles, one whom I have not seen for 15 years and whose children I have not seen for 20 is in Houston, Texas. None of them will even be able to recognize me in order to carry out the murder. They would have killed the director of the German Academic Exchange Service, who is standing a meter away from me, especially as she is not blonde and her hair is curly like mine. My second uncle is very sweet and also somewhat strange. I get the feeling that he will not do it. There remains his 4 sons. The eldest is also eccentric and does not like people at all. He will not even meet with them. The second is impossible. I categorically refuse to let him get involved in my murder, as he has the worst political views imaginable. That leaves 2, and in reality, they are my only 2 friends from that side of the family. I prefer the younger one. He is still a university student. Right now, he must be enjoying his summer vacation after finishing his exams. It will most likely be possible for him to carry out the task. Maybe the middle son of my eldest brother, who, truth to tell, is my most beloved family member, will come with him. He's an even better candidate than my cousin for the task of killing me, as it would be a shame for my cousin to destroy his future like that after having successfully made it to his 4th year of studying dentistry, which is, of those who know, one of the most boring subjects you can study, to the point that it makes you want to commit suicide. However, I think that this cousin will not let my middle nephew kill me all by himself, as they are very close friends. He will come along, at least to entertain him on the way to here. And since they have not been informed of the mission far enough in advance, they will not be able to obtain a gun inside Germany. They will pass by a supermarket and buy a kitchen knife, and then they head directly here. For my part, when I see them, I will stand up to embrace them, since I know nothing of their intentions. But as I draw closer to them, I will notice the anger and the harsh look in their eyes, of which I know they are capable, but not for a day did I think they would direct it at me, ever. I will be startled. I will ask them in a sad, scared, trembling voice, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" They will say, "We've come to kill you." Why? Because you're a terrible disappointment. Me? How? What are you doing with these people, smiling at them like an idiot? How can you let this idiot ask you such an idiotic question like he is? You're free to accept being insulted like this, but why do you accept an insult directed at us, your family as well? What even brought you here? There's this project that has to do with dialogue between the East and the West. What's this rubbish? Nothing serious, I just need some money. You're insane, my nephew shouts. Money? You could have asked me or my grandfather, he means my father, or whoever, for however much money you wanted. But you know me and the issue of my being financially independent as means to liberate myself. Oh yeah, we got it. Yes, we get it. Will you get it now yourself? I bow my head. They say they will let me reflect for a bit. They will wait for me behind that distant tree. Suddenly, I remember the journalist who asked me the question. With sad eyes, I turn towards him and point in the direction of the tree. There. Do you see that tree? That one. My nephew and my cousin are standing there with a knife. They might pounce on me at any moment and slaughter me. What do you advise me to do? Thank you.
Actually, since we didn't know what happened to Adania after that, and what this journalist, how he helped her or he ran away, as I suppose he must have done. Let's go back now to our debate. Thank you very much. Thank you, the three of you. It was really very interesting readings, And now let's try to discuss something which is of course related to your work, but is also more general. And practically, I have two questions to ask the three of you. The first one is related to the Palestinian literature. Of course, we all know that after the Nakba of 1948, the Palestinians as a people went through a huge tragedy, and the major part of that tragedy that they became non-existent. That is, the name of Palestine was abolished, and the Palestinians as a people were no more Palestinians. They became nameless. Even the Palestinians who stayed in Palestine, which became Israel, their name was changed to become the Arabs of Israel. They are no more Palestinians. Actually, the Palestinians in Israel are the only Arabs in the Arab world. All the other Arabs have other names, except the Palestinians. And inside this huge tragedy, the Palestinian literature tried to revive and to recreate the Palestinian identity. And here I can speak about a huge innovation in the Palestinian language, bringing back Palestine to the discourse and inventing the metaphors, which will become something constant in the Palestinian consciousness. And here I can speak about the works of Mahmoud Darwish, Samih Al-Qasim, Emil Habibi, Ghassan Kanafani, Jabra Ibrahim Jabra, and of course many others who played a major role in reformulating this consciousness and this identity. So my question for the three of you, and the three of you are living in coming from different places of Palestine with different experiences. Actually, the Palestinians of Israel, like Adania, have their own special experience, which is different from the Palestinians of the West Bank and from the Palestinians of Jerusalem. And my question is, how do you feel? Are you, in a way or another, continuing this heritage? Are you adding to it? Are you revolting against it? What is your relationship with all this important and huge Palestinian literary heritage? So we begin with, how we want to begin? With the way we began readings?
Is this on?
Randa.
Is this? Well, just to kind of bounce on Adania's reading and the sort of humor, and it's a humor that's satirical and biting, and I that's the kind of writing that I like to do, and I wasn't aware that I was continuing a tradition until I read Emil Habibi's The Secret Life of Said the Pesoptimist. So speaking of what Ilyas is talking about in terms of inventiveness of language, Emil Habibi takes the two words mutasha'im and mutasha'il and puts them together, mutafa'il and mutasha'im, to create the Pesoptimist, which is about a Palestinian and his family who remained in historical Palestine after 1948, and he hangs out with aliens, and it's just hilarious. It's kind of like a Palestinian Candide, but better. And when I first read it, I was just blown away by the humor, and I think it's the humor that exists in all populations that have been wiped out or oppressed. You see Native American fiction and the humor there, and Jewish lit and the humor there, and Palestinian lit has it, this amazing streak of dark satire that I love. So.
In my case, I always consider myself continuing Arabic tradition of writing much more than Palestinian. We are writing in the same language, and the traditions of Arabic poetry and Arabic prose of the whole region has a great influence on me. much more than it's just the Palestinian literature. And to be honest, I never seen myself as just a Palestinian writer. This idea would drive me crazy a little bit, just to be considered as a Palestinian poet who has a certain tradition and should continue or should discontinue. Because also beside the Arabic influences and the Arabic heritage, I think the heritage of the whole region. I think, for example, one of my big influences is the Persian mystical poetry. I was influenced by it much more than the Arabic mystical poetry, for example. So it's hard to say that we are continuing and we are discontinuing. I think this is a critical obsession. They always try to refer you to a certain tree, and they can't imagine a further tree. They always would refer you to the tree which is in front of your house, while you would be belonging to a tree which is miles away. So, and I'm also, the idea of roots, I'm not very happy with it. And even the idea of identity, I'm not a big fan of identity. And my paradox in life that I ended to be a sort of committed writer, because I consider myself somehow committed. I'm in the political struggle and in the Palestinian nation struggle, but in the same time, inside me as a writer, I am against all those fabrications.
I don't even recognize myself as a writer, to add in his Najwa. No, seriously, I mean, I still like write or make a mess, I think, in literature. I'm playing more. For Palestinian literature, I think it's exactly as Elias was indicating. Each of us probably had a specific experience in relation to Palestinian literature. Being a Palestinian in historic Palestine, we were not really allowed to read Palestinian literature. It was banned. But I remember there was one publishing house that distributed the books by Ghassan Kanafani. By the way, the title of our event today is taken from one of his novels. He's a great writer. So I wanted to read his books. You know, when we were kids, we're a big family. We're 11, but we were living together 5, but the mess we can make is like for 50 people. So the only way that my parents, they managed to control us is encouraging us to read, because like, you know, you're going to be quiet for a long time. And so from a young age, I used to read literature, like, you know, you're 7, 8, and you have to get a book. If you don't understand, it doesn't matter, but you have to get a book. The only one I saw, like, so I started from the first shelf, etc., moving on, and I saw my sisters. I'm the youngest of all these big family, and the ones next to me, we have 4 or 5 years age difference, and they were reading Ghassan Kanafani, and I wanted to read Ghassan Kanafani, because why they only read Ghassan Kanafani? Why don't I read Ghassan Kanafani? And I remember my father, he did not allow me, and my sisters, they did not allow me. They said, no, you don't understand it. And he had the title of Rijal fi Shams, Men in the Sun, or Men and Rifles, and I really wanted to grow old and read this, like, you know, they told me when I become 13, I can read them. And so I didn't really feel that it was something like it's forbidden, it's something that I seek to read, but I'm always like short either in age or understanding or whatever, so it was like a great enigma. The only one I could read at that age was a great writer. I love him, and he was one of the greatest people who influenced me is Khalil Sakakini. He's an educator and he's a writer in some sense that wrote between the First World War and Second World War before he was expelled from Palestine. And so I was allowed to read his text because he was an educator and he was writing about schools. So I also would like to explain something about schools. I hated school since the first day I entered school. I really hated this institution and I continue to hate it until now. But when I was a kid, there was also the Fida'is, like sending Katyushas, bombing Katyushas on the north of Palestine and Israel. And I was hoping every day that they will bomb my school. You know, it's like, yeah, please, just do it. You know, liberate me from this institution. And so I didn't leave home. Like, I was insisting to listen to the news because I really believed they will do it. And my father, okay, he was so tolerant with me and he waited to say, okay, you can listen to the news. They did not bomb your school. You have to go to school. Until I started reading Khalil Sakakini, and because he proposed an alternative school system, and I was in love with him as a great writer, because as it was like, for me, it is the first moment I really thought, like, we don't need to bomb my school, that we actually can change it, and I tried to make a small revolution, and like to convince the principal, like, let's have this free school, we can come whenever we want, we study whatever we want, and we might as well not come, because these were his ideas. But then I continued also reading his texts, and one of his amazing practices that he continued writing his diaries every day, and this is, I think, something that influenced me in relation to words, that I found myself, like, I want to be like him, I want to think like him, I want to be free like him, and I started writing my diaries every day. I mean, I continued doing that, I think, until the age of 20 or 21, then I stopped. He continued all of his life. So in a way, the relation with Palestinian literature is very complex. It's not like you can continue a tradition. Sometimes you would continue something, sometimes you wouldn't. And then you would go back to reading, for instance, Ghassan Kanafani. He's a great mind. I mean, I cannot say that he's only a Palestinian writer. I mean, you read his text, and for me, he's one of the existential writers in a way, existential literature, and he was influenced, I think, by Sartre quite a lot. So I don't know if I answered with this long.
No, actually, thank you. Actually, the question was not about identity. I mean, of course, all writers, all good writers are human writers. Otherwise, we do not read them. When I read Dostoevsky, I forget Russia, and I remember the human condition. When I read Mahmoud Darwish, I forget Palestine. And for me, and if Palestine is present in Mahmoud Darwish's poetry or in Kanafani's literature, it's a human condition, and it's go beyond the political situation. So my question was not about committed literature. If Najwan feels now he's obliged to be committed, I'm sorry for you, but this is the condition. I mean, it's the choice, the Palestinian choice. Actually, being a committed human being or a committed writer is not a choice. You are obliged to be committed, because if you take the city from where you come, they come to your home, they come to the houses of people and kick them from their houses and destroy the houses. So actually, even if you don't want to be part of any political thing, they are dragging you to be part of this political thing. So the issue of the question was mainly about a tragedy which is continuing. Because unfortunately, when we speak about the Palestinian Nakba, we speak about 1948, and this is not true. The Palestinian Nakba did not happen in 1948. In 1948 happened a major phase of the Nakba. The Nakba is happening now. Just go to the wall and see how they are encircling the cities and villages of the West Bank, how they are burning olive trees all over Palestine. Even in Israel itself, just go to Nazareth and go to this neighborhood of the Safafri, who are just facing their village, Safuriye, which they cannot, and their land is there, and they cannot even go to visit their land. So the Nakba is still continuing. And the problem here is the tragedy of the Palestinian human being, and the writers are part of that. So in this sense, I felt that, of course, we cannot continue. Nobody continues anybody. But in the last analysis, after 100 years, we will form something together, which can can be called not Palestinian literature, because I agree with you, this is an Arabic literature, but a Palestinian voice in literature. But in this condition, we come to my second question, which is about exile. And I lately read a very interesting text by an Israeli historian, Amnor Raz Karkovsky, about exile. And actually this was a lecture at the Wissenschaft Kolleg in Berlin, and then it was published in the Journal of Palestine Studies. And in this text, Karkovsky, who is a historian of the Jewish history, of the Middle Ages of Jewish history, put forward the hypothesis that now, in culture, the Palestinians are the ones who represent the exile. The Israelis left the idea of exile, and now the idea of exile is represented in the Palestinian culture. And he gave two examples. He gave the example of Edward Said's works, theoretical works, and he gave the example of Mahmoud Darwish's poetry, and he read them also through Benjamin, which I think it was a very, very creative way of reading. Now, you who live inside Palestine or outside Palestine or in between, what's exile for you? Do you feel exile at home? And how do you define yourself as exilees? Yes.
I was interested in that hypothesis about the Palestinians being the new exiles. The story that I read from is sort of an homage to Babel's story of My Dovecot about the Jewish pogroms in 1905 in Odessa. And when I first read it, I thought this could be a Palestinian kid, and thinking about this total grafting that you can do from the pogroms to what happened in Gaza and what's happening now. But for me, I have a very personal, individualized history of how I'm in exile, which is that my dad had to leave in 1967, Palestine, and I grew up in Kuwait, where a lot of Palestinians went in the 70s, and left after Saddam invaded, and couldn't go back because all the Palestinians were ejected from Kuwait and not allowed to go back. And so I moved to the States, where when someone asked me, where are you from? It would take me like half an hour to talk about. And I've gotten really good at condensing it, like I just did just now. And then I've moved around ever since I moved to the States. I've lived in Texas, and I've lived in Michigan, and I've lived in California. And my credit is really fucked up because I had a kid when I was 18, so I could never own a home, I don't think, because I'm really bad with my taxes as well. So, and then when I tried to go back to Palestine. This time last year, my husband works for an airline, and so he was like, I'll make it happen, you should go back. And I went back. I flew to Tel Aviv. I was there for 8 hours. I was detained and searched and asked several questions. And then when they found out that my dad is Palestinian and my grandpa's Palestinian, they said, you're Palestinian. You can't come in through here. Adania says I'm lucky that I could get my ID figured out and get in through Jordan. But yeah, I spent 15 hours on the plane getting there, 15 hours going back. And I was like, wow, I am so in exile. This is exactly what's happening to me right now. And I stink really badly. And I think, and then ever since I was young, people, because my mother's Egyptian, people would always say, well, you're not Palestinian, you don't look Palestinian. Actually, the first person who told me I looked Palestinian was Adania. The first time she saw me, she was like, you look exactly like the Palestinians in the West Bank. Allah, you look exact. I can't do her voice, it's so perfect. But I love her voice.
Because Adania doesn't look like Palestinian.
Well, see, it's this authenticity thing. I think that I hate making generalizations, but Arabs have this thing about authenticity, you don't look Arab, or you don't, because you're, I don't know, it's always bothered me. But now I'm like, I'm fucking Palestinian. And if someone says, who says so? I'm going to say, Israel says so.
شو نجوان حبيبي توكل على الله
والله يعني the issue of exile now in Palestine. يعني we could talk about many things relevant to the issue of being exiled at homeland. First, I have to say, the other day, a friend of mine here was asking me, is it true that you are living under a sort of apartheid system? I said, no, it's not true, or it's not very precise. I have to say that we are privileged to have 3 or 4 or maybe 5 different horrible fascist system we are living under. And she was asking me, such what? I said, from one side, we have apartheid techniques, which is from the South Africa regime. We have many of those. We have special roads for settlers and special doors for Palestinians. And recently we have buses just for Palestinians, etc. We have an apartheid thing. But we also do have things which is the reservations of the Native Americans. We have part of the reservation things, but we don't have casinos. But I am even noticing...
There was a casino in Jericho.
No, in the beginning of the so-called peace process, they started with opening a casino in Jericho, and it didn't work because it was designed as to be this reservation of the natives. Anyway, this is the second thing. But I'm noticing also, going back to the reservations, I'm noticing that most of my friends became alcoholists. Yeah, I could be the only one who till now is struggling not to be an alcoholist. So this is the second system we have. The third system, and I should say it also and openly, we have some techniques, some Nazi techniques, some German things, and I'm not here exaggerating. We could talk about precise kind of laws which based on blood, which would remind any neutral researcher what the techniques of the Nazis in Germany. And we have something from the fascists the fascist era in Italy. We have this unbelievable combination. And somehow we are somehow privileged when we're gonna tell anybody about this. It's so amazing from one side. From the other side, we also living the experience of exile. In what manner? Edward Said, one of the best people who wrote about exile, he said that the psychology of the exilee is always looking at the reality and comparing it with something else, with the previous homeland or something. For me, when I'm staying in Jerusalem or being in Haifa, I am always looking on the reality, and on the same moment I'm comparing it with the reality which is not exist at the moment. I would see the Haifa today, and I would look on the Palestinian houses which are closed now. So the experience of the exilee is there, but with the new element. Usually, when we think about exile, we think about someone is kicked from his homeland and sent to somewhere else. And the new place would be an alien place. In our case, we are exiled in our place, and which ruled by the enemy, who's doing everything to damage you and to destroy you. And you have to witness this and to react on this and to deal with this. So this is like, some years ago, a friend of mine, he's a visual artist, Steve Sabella, he came with idea. He said to me, Najwan, we are not exiled. I said to him, what do you mean? He said, the place is exiled. This city we are living in is out of its geography, out of its surrounding. In Jerusalem, I never see a Syrian, I never see a Lebanese, I never see Egyptian, I never saw, sorry, my English is horrible, because I just speak Arabic and I have a sort of Google translator in my head. So I do think in Arabic and I do translate. So culturally, this piece of land is exiled. it was hijacked by the Zionist project and exiled from the whole surrounding. We are exiled from our history and from our surrounding. And at that time, I did with him a project, a visual art project. We select the name Jerusalem in Exile because it's a sort of exile, but unusual one, which is something which needs a lot of meditation and a lot of thinking of what reality we are living in. So that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar feeling to Najwan. I mean, I have a problem as well with the term exile. It's very problematic for me to relate to it. I don't consider myself as an exilé or Randa or whoever doesn't live there. Or sometimes because exactly as Najwan is saying, you're in Palestine. And the place, it's not only in 1948 has been taken from you or in a way is pushing you out. It says like there's no place for you. It's constantly, it's a constant operation that does not stop. If you go a few months away and you come back, the place had changed. So it's like a new place again. It tells you you do not belong here. I mean, I don't know how can one feel exiled outside, but I know very well the experience of being exiled in Palestine with these little details. Like you go, you know there are the 3 trees. You know these 3 trees. You pass the road many times, but suddenly you cannot take that road because it's blocked. Or I don't know, the Israelis are obsessed with destroying and rebuilding. They are destroying and rebuilding. And it's like somebody neurotic. I think it's like my mom. She always wants to destroy the house and rebuild it. There's like a constant thing. And the destruction of the landscape and changing it as if it's like somebody wants to take your memory and it makes you feel a stranger. You cannot recognize it. It's that you start doubting yourself. Did I have a memory here? Did the 3 trees were here or no, they did not exist? So it's a strange feeling that you know, I don't feel it like when I'm actually outside Palestine, because when I'm outside Palestine, and you have the same system, you know, thanks to capitalism, neoliberalism, you feel everywhere it's the same, you know, you just like a few things, nothing might change. But in Palestine, we have constantly things changing, you know. And I think it's also about the place, the trees, you know, how many trees are... I'm sorry because I talk about trees because I normally just see little things. I'm kind of autistic, so I just keep focusing. I don't see I cannot speak about the people, the suffering of the people. I can speak about the suffering of the trees. It's easier. And you see, they are constantly being relocated. If any of you come to Palestine, Israel, you always will see these kind of old trees, old olive trees. Suddenly they're appearing in a new highway because they're being relocated. They're taking from one farm because there's a law since the British mandate you cannot uproot a tree which is older than 60 years old. So it's like the Israeli government came with a thing, okay, we will not uproot it, we are relocating it. So like it's gonna appear somewhere else. And this is constant game, it's like crazy, makes you crazy. So if anything, the exile is in Palestine actually. And you constantly need to struggle with that.
Thank you. Okay, we still have half an hour, and in this half an hour, the floor is opened. Those who want to speak must approach. There are 2 mics on the 2 sides of the room, please. And so the floor is open. Please.
Listening to you, I see the opportunity to maybe get an answer to a question which has been quite tormenting to me. I speak not as a Jew or a Palestinian. Sorry, you can't hear me? You want me to be closer? I speak to you as a colleague. That was a remarkable quality of writing I was hearing. I spent 20 years writing a book which is published, 800 pages, which has not only the Nazis, but the Pan-Arab Revolution, largely the FLN in North Africa, the anti-colonial revolution, and also the Holocaust. And later I represented Index on Censorship with the release of Mordecai Vanunu. This was a prison at Ashkelon where in Israel until 98, it was the only country in the world that had legalized torture. Palestinians were tortured there, and Mordecai, whose father could recite the whole Torah, I observed the character of the Palestinians and the Israelis and the enormous, terrible feeling they have about each other. These are racially brothers. They have occupied parts of the world together. Why is it so difficult for these two people to pity each other? I mean, I listened to Mordecai after what happened to him in Ashkelon. Became totally a regional political person, and he hated the Israelis, his own people, you know. This situation, you're going to be neighbors forever, it looks like, you know, unless the Israelis are kicked out. At what point and on what basis will you be able to pity each other for the things that have happened to you both, you know, and that you're doing to each other?
Beautiful. Yes, anyone has any?
I just, my sister teaches in Ramallah. She's a musician and a music teacher, and she teaches in the refugee camps. And someone took a bunch of kids on a field trip to London, and they took forever to get their visas. And on the third or fourth hour of this field trip, one of the little girls asked one of the teachers on the field trip, "When are we going to stop at a checkpoint?" She was just like, she was just worried. They were going to all these different streets, and she was like, "When are we going to stop at a checkpoint?" I mean, I just don't think, I find that it's almost irresponsible to ask a little girl like that to pity, you know, the person who works at the checkpoint. I mean, I just think this situation is not an equal situation. We're brothers, we're actually cousins. This is not like an equal, like, oh, we actually just need to pity them and they just actually need to pity us. This is about human rights. This is about people who are fucked with every day. And to me, like, the question posits an equality in the situation that just isn't present. So I can't even approach it.
I totally agree with Randa in her answer. I just want to add a small thing. Usually, when they are talking about the region, they ignore a basic fact, which is the colonial reality. Israel is a colonial regime. This is how it should be perceived. Dealing with it as if they are neighbors who are fighting, it's not like this. So I think what is very much needed to reach the pity is a sort of clear stand against the Israeli colonialism, against the big sin toward the Palestinian people. So I think we should start from the beginning. All the discourse which used now, all the terms of the media are fabrications to mislead and to camouflage the real reality, which is a colonial reality. I'm not talking here about the common history. In the Arab world, usually, historically, Jews are part of our societies. I'm not talking about this. But I'm also talking about those settlers who came from all over the world to take the lands of others. This should be judged, not... Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, I just like, in addition to all what you said, there's also something else I think we should point out to, because you know, this exact relation between the colonizer and the colonized. The colonized never, I mean, I think historically we're not like stupid. We know we did not commit the atrocities against Jewish Europeans, or created we built like concentration camps or gas chambers, etc. And in these times when Europe was building that, we were like opening, I mean, it was normal. We received Jewish Europeans, even they were settlers actually. And I think we have still this element of the Palestinians. They don't have a problem in accepting Israelis should they stop being colonizers. The minute that you stop taking, not even human rights, like, because the human, like, what are these rights? It's something beyond this, like really kind of a sadistic kind of setting that is being implemented there with joy. Sometimes, you know what, I would love that for it to finish, and we come to this place that, you know, we're not even like good friends, and we just like leave each other in peace, you know. I don't want to be your friend. Just like, don't be my enemy, you know. Don't humiliate me constantly in every single moment. And I think it's very important. But we should also highlight the fact that, you know, Palestinians were all welcoming. I think until now, this girl, she would actually, we have this thing. We don't have this grudge. It is the problem of the Israelis in accepting the Palestinians, not vice versa, that we are rejecting each other. There is clear party which is rejecting the existence of the other. And one is like they don't have the problem with that existence, I think.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
So my question is, my family are Palestinian citizens of Israel, and so I very much identify with the point that was made earlier about the difference of how, like, myself growing up in the US I was able to identify with Palestinian culture and connect with it in a way that, ironically, like when I'm with my family in Haifa and Tarshiha, it's like even though everything's around them and Palestinian culture is all around them, at the same time, so much of their history is hidden from them. It's like the Israelis are constantly hiding it, so it's all around you, but yet, like, younger generation in some ways never see it, though there's now a younger generation that I think is becoming more empowered. My question was, I know that we were talking about Israelis as colonizers, and especially I think in particular that applies to the Ashkenazim, Europeans coming over and sort of inhabiting a land that really wasn't theirs. But we also know the condition of, like, Arab Jews and the way that they were in some ways forced out and moved in. And so I was just wondering, and I know that Mizrahim in Israel are among the most racist at times. I've had, like, really intense and racist encounters with them, often maybe because they're trying to disconnect themselves or detach from their Arab identity to prove their Jewishness. But I was also wondering what your relations, in particular, I think this applies maybe to Najwan and Adania, is how your sort of relationship has been, and how, if there's any Mizrahi connection to your writing, like, are there Arab Jews who do connect with it or feel connected to it, or, in terms of it being like a general tradition, like you guys were talking earlier, the region is what influenced you, you said, Najwan. So I'm just curious if there's any sort of connection in that way, and if you see any, like, appreciation, or if there's any mutual appreciation.
Thanks.
Literature. Yeah, mostly in terms of literature in your writing.
Who want to reply? Najwan? Yalla.
I will say few things. Firstly, for me, I always saw Israel as a corporation, as a regime and corporation. I never thought of it as the representative of the Jews. And I will not allow for Israel to ruin the historical relation between Arab and Jews, which it did, but in my opinion, this should not be happen. Unfortunately, I have a friend, her name Rahila Mizrahi, and she always said to me, we were equally victims of as Arab Jews, we were equally victims of the Zionist project. We were hijacked. And this woman, after 30, she discovered her identity, and now she's speaking and writing even in Arabic. So there is, but it's very elementary. It's just in the beginning. But I think one day the Jews should rediscover their Arabic identity, and they do belong to the Arab world. The Arab world is not the enemy. The Arab world is their historical roots.
Thanks. Here, I want to add one thing. There are many Israeli writers, Mizrahim writers like Shimon Ballas, Sami Shetrit. Shimon Ballas is Iraqi, Sami Shetrit is originally Moroccan, and others, who now reflect this identity, this Arabic identity in the literature. And they are great writers, and our relationship with them is excellent. So there is no problem on that level at all. Yes?
I want to stress a little bit on the point that Najim Darwish made about the colonial aspect. I've made 2 short visits separated by many years, and in going from Ramallah to West Jerusalem, which is a short distance of a few miles, this realization hits you very clearly that you're going to a place that doesn't really belong to the place where it is located, because you feel like you're going into Europe in a distance of about 5 miles from place. And I was born in what is now Pakistan, before it was Pakistan, and I was born in Lahore and moved. But every time in that border, which is as tense perhaps between any two countries, I never feel like I'm going to a different cultural entity. Or I think this aspect of settler colonialism, where you feel that difference so palpably that it has to reflect inside of the Zionist, Ashkenazi, whatever you call them, in a sense of a feeling of guilt inside as to what they're actually doing there. I mean, they have built a very successful country from all appearances, but that country is like it's on another planet. It's like a space capsule, which is insulated from the void that is all around it, which is a very different place. And if I could feel this in 3 or 4 days, I made 2 or 3 trips between Ramallah and so on, because my son was studying at Birzeit. I'm sure others feel it much more, those who have the experience. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes?
Yes, I wanted to make a comment and a question. One is, the comment is to the audience. I think that it hasn't been said yet today, but in fact, Israel would not exist without the unbelievable support and the great necessity that the United States government has for an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East. And to take responsibility for that, for people who live in this country, is utterly urgent. I'm from Revolution Books, and that takes me to a point I want to ask the panelists, which is, can we and how do you think about a world where profit and the whole dog-eat-dog system run by an empire and experienced in the way you're discussing? Do you imagine a world where a revolution could bring into a society where the people work in common for the common good? Do you think about that, and how does that get expressed? A lot of times artists are the first to speak, powerfully about that, and I wanted to see what you all think about that.
Maybe Randa can.
I actually just want to go back to your point about America's complicit sort of financial and other support of Israel. It just really, speaking of taxes, I just hated that a couple of weeks ago that I had to pay my taxes. I was like, this is going to, oppress my cousins, literally, here's a check. And, and after my unsuccessful trip to Tel Aviv, I went on the State Department website to see, I'm an American citizen. I wanted to know what my rights were. And in the State Department website, it actually just says, oh, by the way, if you appear Arab or Muslim, you may be denied entry. Sorry, it's there. We told you, so there's nothing you can do. And Barbara Boxer is trying to pass this law now with all her buddies, where any Israeli citizen can come to this country and go the fast track. I don't know if you know, when you get into JFK or whatever, LaGuardia, you're standing in line forever with crazy teenagers that are trying to use their phones, and their parents are like, no, you can't use your phone. It can, they're just, everyone's cranky. No, but they want it so that Israelis can do the fast track and not get asked any questions. I still get asked questions, and I married a white man, and when we travel together, people say, welcome home, and I'd never heard that before. Before then, people were asking me questions when I come home. I think it's not answering your question directly, but it's very painful to be a citizen of a country that doesn't that obviously makes it clear to me in very many ways that even though I am an American Chicago born, just like Saul Bellow said, I'm actually not treated as such or don't have the rights that I thought I did. But maybe you can answer to the points where she was talking about
خلص بدك تحكي؟
والله, she's right in what she's saying, and United States is supporting democracies, and Israel is the first democracy in the Middle East. And of course, now we have two democracies in the Middle East. We have Saudi Arabia. So, good for the United States government to keep support democracies.
Yes.
I'm from the third democracy now. I'm from Egypt. Look at how that worked out for us. But I've been very much enjoying actually just the kind of celebration of literature and enjoying the reading outside of politics or anything else. I think that's very refreshing to actually get that from Palestinians and to open that to people here and to myself. And I'm personally very curious of how, when what happened in Tunisia and kind of spread or echoed to Egypt and to Syria, politically speaking, in terms of the revolution or the movements, that's on one side. But I'm personally very curious in terms of having seen it in Egypt, in terms of the arts, the literature, the writing. So much of it in the last 2 years has been about internalizing what's happening in Egypt. And I'm just very genuinely curious with Palestinians, is there any echo there in terms of this, forget the term Arab Spring, but in that whole conversation, is there any internalization with Palestinians, the writing, the poetry, literature, artwork about Palestinians within anything, within any effect whatsoever?
Anyone want to reply?
Thanks.
Well, going back to the question of the revolution, we've been in a state of revolution since like 50, 60, 70, 80 years, and now we're tired. No, it's not only tired, it's unfeasible any longer in Palestine. I mean, we know that Israel is not only like a colonizer body, but it's a kind of a really well advanced and military techniques. It's the kind of what they call the virtuous war, where like trying to run a war without direct contact. And now in Palestine, what's happening? Basically, the place has been cut into little cantons and pieces. You have 600 checkpoints, more or less. The wall, punishments of which areas can go, like somebody with a green ID card cannot go to the area of they're divided like A, B, C areas, division between the West Bank and Gaza. Palestinians from inside Israel, from historic Palestine, cannot go to the West Bank and Gaza, etc. So basically, the idea that you can join together as a group is not possible any longer in Palestine, whereas in the Arab world, it is possible. You still have this kind of public spaces, squares where everybody can gather. In Palestine, you don't have that. And actually, when you go to a checkpoint, you no longer see the soldier, or you can fight with a soldier because you have the glass and you have a microphone, a sound coming in. You have this kind of gates. You stand in a line, and the line is very thin. You stand behind each other, and you go through this gate, and the gate circulates, and then you are on your own there, and you have the scanner. So it's like you're completely kind of surrounded by all these machines. That it's isolating you. The sense you only want to go out, and then the whole struggle in Palestine becomes as if it's an individualistic struggle. It's like you trying to find a way. If you want to move the wall, I mean, like all this kind of falsified perception of the world just dividing Palestinians and Israelis. I mean, it's nice as a romantic idea, but the truth it's not. It's dividing between Palestinians and Palestinians and their land. So you move the wall, then it's going to be on the land of your neighbor. So, okay, you want to gain few square meters here, but your neighbor will lose them. So it's a whole kind of really rat or mice experiments in how you create a situation where we reach of learned helplessness. You don't know when you can do something or not. You're really passive. completely sitting there, and of course with the support, the US is not only supporting the Israeli government, of course it's supporting the Palestinian Authority. With a whole neoliberal policy, everybody now has mortgages in Palestine, everybody, and everybody is like working with the Palestinian Authority because they need to have a salary to pay the mortgage for the car and the flat that they bought, which is something that Palestinians never bought, a flat or a car. So now these guys cannot revolt against the Palestinian Authority because they're going to lose their job and there's all the mortgages. So there's like everywhere, like we have a new situation where as a society, we don't have a sense of this togetherness. There's complete division, separation of people, and there's the invasion of neoliberalism. So I hope, in the face of this kind of new methods of occupation, there probably would come a new method of resistance, but what it is. And I think Palestinians now are wondering about that. What can we do? It's not as similar as in Egypt. Of course, we're enchanted by what's happening and this kind of like, oh, there is hope, but actually not for us.
There seems to be actually a new kind of revolution happening. I mean, I agree with you that the Intifada happened once and then it happened again, and it's sort of like we're tired. But it seems really interesting that there's this nonviolent resistance movement. I mean, speaking of Ilyas Khoury's with Bab al-Shams, these pop-up villages that are happening where people, like in Bil'in, if anyone watched 5 Broken Cameras, there are people who are setting up tent villages and resisting. And it's really, I think it's amazing and wonderful. So I think, there is this, it's like this new and inventive and nonviolent way of resistance that I hadn't seen before. So maybe that's one of the strains of things that are going to happen.
We have still 3 minutes and a half. For one question, who will...
Could I?
Very brief question.
Politics seems to have a way of subsuming art, and this festival exists very much on the border of art and politics. And I wonder, I'd like to ask how the games that I see being played, at least in my university all the time, of identity and identity politics, how those can be harmful to thought, especially for writers and artists.
Yes? The second other question, and we finish. Yes, please.
Question is maybe related to what you have. I am a Palestinian citizen of Israel, and I'm a physician, retired one, and in retirement I dabble in writing a bit. And I wanted to ask, it is wonderful to see so many people listening to 3 young Palestinian writers. Not long ago, Edward Said was decrying the fact that we couldn't narrate our story, the Palestinian people. Would you like to comment about how you feel about the fact that you can address such a group of non-Palestinians, non-Arabs? How does it feel, and how did you get here? How did you get to the point where you can speak to Americans in their language, on their stage?
Thank you. Very quickly answer.
I would start from the end, by accident. We arrived by accident.
They sent a car to our hotel and drove us here.
No. خلاص. بدكم تجاوبوا? Okay. With this, we are arriving to end, but I really didn't like to end on the pessimistic remarks of Adania. I'm more pes optimist, so I think that the horizon in Palestine is open, and nothing can close it. There are many attempts to close it, and every time, before the second Intifada, everybody was saying the same thing, and then the second Intifada began. I'm sure that the Palestinians will find their way to continue their struggle, not because they love struggling, or not because they hate the Jews, or not because they do not pity the Israelis. Actually, the beautiful moment will be when the oppressed can pity the oppressor. And this is a moment we are waiting, and this can only be done when the Palestinian horizon will be opened for a real solution, a solution based upon justice and based upon equality. And with this, I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank our three writers. Thank you very much.